you want to run pigs this year to grow pork for you and your family, you got to start off with the basics, just infrastructure, how we're going to keep them in. For us, we run all of our pigs through the woods. So if you've got a lot of woods or even decent pasture with some shade, some tree access, that'll be fantastic. But we've got to keep them in without dumping a lot of infrastructure into permanent fencing so you can move your pigs so they're happy and healthy. So to start, I use fiberglass poles. We get all of ours from Kencove fencing, and these guys have a UV protection. They're extremely durable, extremely lightweight, and you've got multiple sections to put your lines. You'll see there's a nice low section. I like to run that when they're very small. And then the max I'll run it is probably this second post here. The reason I run them at these two posts is because of where their eye line is. And we'll go look at that in a minute to give you an idea of perspective. To run it through that T-post, we use Powerflex Turbo 9. It has 9 copper filaments that run through it. So there's 9 possible contacts throughout this little strand of polywire. Again, nice and lightweight, easy to work with. We also use the Terrygate 3-to-1 ratio gear reel. This helps you just kind of keeping it all organized. It's got a nice little lock on it, so you can keep that nice and tensioned as well as you're going. You can get a 1-to-1 reel, that's fine. You're just going to be reeling a lot. It's a lot of extra work. Having that 3-to-1 ratio one time around with the handle is 3 times around on the reel. Saves you time and effort. And then from there, to keep them electrified, I use Premier One solar powered energy chargers. They have multiple of them. This is the 120X they have. It's got a nice big panel. It's got an AC charging port. So if you need to charge it, or if you want to run it straight from the grid, you can do that from here. It's got 2 batteries inside, and all you do is you just hook up your clips. Got your hot wire, goes directly on to that Powerflex. And then you got your ground, which is take a grounding rod. Most of the time, if you get these, they come in a kit, and they come with a grounding rod. Or you got some rebar lying around. As long as you got good contact in the ground, that'll definitely ground it for you to keep them in. It's key to have a decent joule output when it comes to your charging box. The rule of thumb is whatever your budget can afford. So you don't need to go and spend thousands of dollars on the biggest and most joule output. Once they put their wet nose on it, they're not going to really mess with it too much. But with that being said, if you can, go for it. Or if you don't want to invest in these and you're just going to keep them close to a power source on the grid, they have AC ones as well. There's multiple places you can order those from. Same thing when it comes to the polywire and the T-posts. This is where I get them from. I'll put all the links to these products down below in the description. But you can always go to your local Tractor Supply, co-op, anywhere that's got similar products that works for your budget. When it comes to like keeping everything organized, that's extremely key, especially these fence posts. I like to keep these nice and piled up either in a barrel of some kind or stacked up somewhere neatly, because these do break pretty easily, or if you get them tangled up and you're just kind of messing with them. So keeping everything organized is key. Same thing with your reels and your wire. Make sure everything's rolled up nice all the time. Don't kind of let it just sit out if it's not being used. Organization and keeping it out of the elements is definitely important. Solar charge boxes, keep them up to date. I like to keep spare batteries just on a trickle charge. So if those do die, especially in the winter time when we have less daylight, especially here in East Tennessee, I've got those batteries that I can throw in there at any time and just kind of keep rotating them through. Summertime, I've got decent sunlight, or I don't need to worry about as much the batteries going dead. But then same point, make sure you keep that all cleaned out of there. It's all buttoned up nice, keeps your spiders and all those other things out. I always like to carry spare alligator clips as well, just in case those do get corroded from being out after a few seasons, being out in the elements, things like that. But you do what you've got to do to make it work. So let's go and kind of see everything, how it works in practice with the pigs actually in the paddock. So this is how we're running our fence. After we set it up, it's run. We've got 2 strands. We've got one nice and low. And then I've also got one nice and high. So that when they're rooting around this edge, you can see that wherever their nose is, their eyes can see where that line is. There's no misunderstanding of where that is. They're not going to get that close to it because they know that when they touch this, they're going to get a little zap and they don't like it. So when I run newer pigs, I like to run 2 to start, just to really make sure they kind of understand this is the way of the world. Once they get older, I can run them on 1, but I only run it on this top. I don't run it down below because I'm not worried about them going underneath it. They're big enough, they can just see that 1. And then that just runs all the way. When we run this wire and I set my fence posts up, I give it between 5 and 10 paces in between each. And that's all relative because of the terrain. There might be some spots where that bottom wire is running a little low. So then I have to put another one a little bit closer so that it keeps that off of that little lull and not grounding itself out. Now, we've gone over how we're keeping them in. Now we got to talk about how we're going to feed them. When I have them in a new area, I'll put the feed around undesirable forage. So briars, black bears I want gone, so I can get some good pasture grass growing. But once they've gone through an area, that next year, and they just need as much work, I'll use these tire feeders. This design is from Jordan Green out of Virginia. It's a very, very simplistic design. You can see it's already beat up pretty good. And I don't have to worry about spending thousands of dollars on big commercial feeders. These are just rough cut boards that I found. Nothing fancy. Threw them together best I could. Went to a local tire place. Hey, do you have any tires that are getting thrown out? 9 times out of 10, they're happy to get rid of them so they don't have to pay to discard them. And you can tell they're pretty beat up, but at the same time, if it does get beat up, I can change it out extremely quickly. The only things I have to purchase for it are galvanized lag bolts, galvanized washers, and that's about it. And if you want, if you think they're going to throw yours around, you can get some galvanized U-bolts, and you can also get some galvanized chain. You can tie it around a tree if you ever need to, but you don't always have to. So if they're going to eat, of course they've got to drink. So how are we going to water them? There's so many different ways you can give water to your pigs. There's troughs, there's the little nipple waters. You can do whatever works best for you. For me, I like these Brower 85-gallon drinkers. These things hold up extremely well. They can beat on it. This thing is just hard, heavy-duty plastic. And then at the same time, it's got a perfect little reservoir on each side that they can get their heads into. It's got a nice metal plate at the base for where they want to chew, and they're not going to destroy it. Comes with a float valve inside, and inside, it's hard to see, but there is a float valve. So as that water level recedes, as they're drinking, it flows it back up. Wintertime, when it does get well below freezing, depending on your climate, you might have to come out here and make sure that that water is not frozen solid at the base. But all in all, that thing works great. And I very rarely have problems. Now, Depending on the size pigs you're going to run, if you're going to run breeding stock or just feeders, you might have to consider T-posting that in or securing it some way. I've run in the past T-posts. There's around it and a big heavy-duty ratchet strap. That normally keeps it in, and especially if it gets low. But if you make sure it maintains full, it takes a lot to knock that thing over. So you've got all your infrastructure set up, you found out where you were going to put your pigs. Now it's time to figure out what pigs you're going to bring home for that season. For us, we started off running pure-blooded Berkshires. We truly enjoyed their fat content, but it came to a point where the bacon on it was a little fattier than we liked. So we've now changed over to a Berkshire crossed with a Duroc. Durocs have a higher protein quality on theirs, and it also now matches well with that beautiful marbling that we're going to get from the Berkshires. When I recommend trying to bring home pigs, I always err on the side of caution for those getting them right off of Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, or even the local sale barn. I would find someone in your local area who is raising the animals the way you are planning on raising yours. So that means they already come with good, healthy breeding stock. They have the same morals and ethics as you, so you know there's no junk in there if you don't want any antibiotics in your animals or pulled teeth or anything like that. It's just clean, unadulterated pigs. What we do is we actually raise our own. This is our new breeding stock for the 2025 season and the 2026. So these are why these girls are a little bit bigger. But when you bring your piglets home, they should be between 7 and 8 weeks old, and those guys should be full of energy, and they're going to be standoffish at first. So you just got to take that time to socialize with them. So then they can come right up to you. They're going to want to get their scratches. They're going to want it to get all the attention in the world. They're very, very social animals. Yes, I understand that these are going to be used for food in the future, but a stress-free animal is extremely important. You want them to only have one bad moment in their entire lives. You don't want their whole lives to be stressed out about interacting with you, or even where they're going to be and in their environment. You want them in a stress-free environment. Hence why we have a lot of acreage here of just forest. Yeah, it's got a little hilliness to it, but they manage fantastically as long as they have some access to flat land. They also like to rut around a lot. When they root, they're trying to get certain things that they can't get out of the feed. So pigs are naturally anemic to some extent. So they're going to root around into the soil, and they're going to eat all of that to try to get those minerals from the soil. So make sure wherever you plan on putting your pigs, you're okay with them rooting around, because they will try to find places to make a mess, just like this. Here the water ran off and had just enough of a spot to catch. Well, they used that and they made a nice big hole, and it is nice and muddy, huh buddy? Hi girlie. Now, why do they like to have a nice wet spot? Well, pigs can't sweat. So to cool off, they create their wallow. That wallow is what keeps them cool, especially in the hot summer days. Or even right now, where it's in the 60s, they're still nice and warm. So they need to find a way to cool off. And this is the way they do it. So wherever you keep your pigs, make sure they have ample shade access and some place to cool off, whether that's just going out there with a hose, finding a sacrificial spot and letting them just go to town in that mud to cool off on those hot summer days, Or if you're able to, warm water out of a hose will work just fine, but not very cold water, because you don't want to put them into shock. That's a huge temperature change to them. Think of it, that's similar to you coming out of a sauna and jumping in a frozen lake. You don't want to do that to them. That's a huge shock. They'll enjoy it after a few minutes, but that initial shock, they are not a fan of. So let's talk about breeds of pigs for a minute. You're not sure exactly what kind of pig you want to bring home. There's lots of options, and a lot of people don't know what they can handle, since these are and will become large 200 to 300 pound animals before they go off to the processor. Don't do analysis paralysis. Just look at weight sizes. So technically, I would consider the breeds that I have, Durocs, Berkshires, to be what I would want to say is a commercial breed, since they do and will grow extremely large. But say you're looking for something smaller, there are homesteading breeds called Cooney-Coonies. They're a New Zealand breed. They're shorter in stature. They're cute little things. They got little tassels on them. And those are for a first-time homesteader or farmer trying to get into working pigs. They are a fantastic starting breed. Now, that doesn't mean you can't jump right in and get one of these large breed animals. They do fantastically well, especially if you train them and socialize them appropriately. That's what it comes down to, just training and socialization. I don't mind working with these larger animals. At first it was intimidating, don't get me wrong. But once I got used to it and they got used to me, and I learned exactly their natural behaviors, I just became to understand them and what their needs were and how to address them appropriately. So if they're not stressed, I understand them, and in turn they slowly will become to understand me and what I need. So now you brought your pigs home, you've got all their infrastructure set up, and the one thing you probably notice is I don't have a shelter for them. Well, at the end of the day, these pigs really don't need one in this environment that they're living in. We keep them right in the forest. So in the summertime, when it's 90 to 100 degrees, this shade cover from all this foliage drops the temperature between 10 and 15 degrees. Again, I give them access to some sort of wallow, or they'll create it themselves. And not only that, if pigs needed that much help, we wouldn't have a wild boar problem in this country. Absolutely not. We would have pigs trying to break into our homes and break into our sheds to find shelter. These guys do fantastic without it. At the same time, when there's harsh elements coming, for example, cold and wet, I try to give them something to keep them out of that cold and wet. A dry place especially, whether that's just a canopy, like I put up in our cedars when we had that big snowstorm come through and those single digit temperatures. That was just enough to keep them comfortable. Otherwise, they wouldn't use it if I gave it to them, because I've tried in the past, and most of the time they don't even want it, because it's not a natural environment for them. So all in all, it does not take a lot to get started with pigs, to grow for you and your family. From the moment they come home, you've got only 4 to 6 months of time with them to feed them, water them, and for you to have healthy, clean pork in your freezer for you and your family and friends. So at the end of the day, what does it take? Infrastructure, fencing. It takes feeders, if you want to use feeders, or if you've got a place for them to work, pour the feed around that and they'll rip that out for you. If you want, give them some shelter, but if you've got beautiful forests like this, use it. Use it to your advantage. And at the end of the day, let the pigs be pigs. Extremely easy to maintain, extremely fun to have around, and I wouldn't imagine having a homestead or a farmstead without this kind of animal. Because at the end of the day, not only do they give you a fantastic protein, not only can they do work for you in your forest or poor land that you have, they can revitalize that. They also bring that wonderful start to an animal husbandry connection that you don't get with a lot of livestock animals. And it is just an experience like no other. So hopefully this motivates you to start growing your own pork for you and your family. And if it does, the motivation will get you started. But discipline is what's going to keep you going. The discipline to go out every day, work with these animals. The discipline to go out in the bad weather and check the fence line. The discipline to know when you need to change what you're doing so they are stress-free and healthy. That is what will drive you to be successful in raising pigs this year.